Hi everyone, ShadeRaven here. Going to offer up another one of my instructional videos. I'm trying to return to doing more of these again for Fantasy Grounds Unity. Most often, this will be for the Pathfinder 2 rule set, but in this case, I've decided rather than jump into the creature things again, doing some of the automation and creature creation stuff. Recently, I've been running in some of my personal campaigns for Pathfinder Society stuff, and a few of them that aren't available out in the store I've been creating by hand and pulling in some online images I found that look like good maps that I'd like to use inside of these little scenarios. So what I found in there is that a lot of them come with preset grids. And with Unity, there's a lot of ability to kind of create overlays, actual grids for the map that can lay on top of the grids, especially if you find maps with nice, clean, uniform, square gridding that is easy to then lay over top to create easy functional grids for in-game. Because in at least in Pathfinder 2, knowing distances from one object to another, from one creature or character to another, is pretty important for figuring out distances for movement, for figuring out ranges on attacks and spells and powers and stuff. So with that in mind, I'm going to try to jump into this real quick. Hopefully this will be of use to some people still toying around with how to uh, take advantage of a lot of the cool functionality that comes with Unity. I know if you go out there and look, I saw some videos recently from David and Joshua who do some amazing things with maps and images and stuff out here, creating some beautiful outputs on that. But this is going to be relatively simple, just taking a map that's already been pre-created, has a grid on it, but it's just a graphic grid as opposed to one that actually comes with the in-game grid that lets us measure out distances and stuff. So with that, first I'm just going to pop in the assets, go to images, make sure I have images selected because that's what's going to allow me to pull up the folder that I want to put this new image into. Because it's an image that I found online and kind of cleaned up using an image editor, I need to pull that into my assets. So popping up here for images because that's what I want to create, going into folders, pop open the little destination area for this particular campaign folder. And with that in mind, I'll just go over here, grab the image I want to put in, which is just a little uh, simple kind of map of a roadway that I'm going to have a caravan get attacked at that the characters will be defending. So that's now in there, and I can kind of close that down knowing the image is there. Come back here, you won't see it right away, but if you refresh, now I suddenly see campaign assets. I pop into here, and there are probably a million different ways to do this. I know there's a way to pull in all campaign assets, but for this case, the way I know easily enough is just to come in here, see that my little caravan defense JPEG's out there with the map I want to use. I can pop that up and see a little preview of it. Yep, that's what I'd found. And then what I can do then is create an image record, which will then populate a new image up into my images tab. And when I do this create image record, it's going to be give me an instant hop into the image editor, which is what we want to be able to do here because that's where we're going to create the grid. So I'm going to set this aside real quick, close down the assets, kind of expand this out so we can see the area a little bit better. Let's see, let's zoom to fill for now. And in general, you can see here's a simple grid that came with this map. Pretty well defined, very uniform. It looks like it's well done. There's no distortion on it, so I should be able to get a nice square kind of in-game grid of this that'll overlay that and create a grid that we can use for tokens and stuff. So now that I'm in the editor, all I have to really do is pop over here to the grid section, and you can see that you could just kind of show a grid and it's going to pop up a little 50 by 51. And you could certainly make adjustments from here. Not just round, see how close that looks. As a matter of fact, 50 by 50 doesn't even look that bad. A lot of times what I'll do though is I'll actually use the grid with mouse thing, which will then, I'll probably pick a spot that looks sort of central, find an area that I really want to crosshair in on, set the mouse down on that, maybe zoom in a little more so I feel like I really got a section I want to grab, and start pulling it till at least I get some approximation of where I'm headed. Um, Throwing that down, I can kind of see that this initial stretch out looks like it's trying to size it about 46 by 46 for these square ones. I can see it's pretty close. You can kind of see from this side to that side, it's not too bad. I could nudge this over just a little bit, and that's probably a little bit too much. There's ways to do minor adjustments where you can just push it a little bit. I don't know how easy it is to see on the video. And then there's full like pixel jumps. But I could see that's probably about where I want to get to. But I could tell looking at this that from the top here to the bottom, there's just a little more growth than necessary. This doesn't quite line up with the bottom line or this right side line. So I know this 46 by 46 is probably not going to work. Odds are, and I could just pop in a number real quick. Click up here, lets me highlight that. And I could throw in 47. How does 47 look? Hit enter, and I can see jump. And in this case, I could see, well, nope, it kind of starts up in my crosshair point where I'm trying to base it off of, but now it kind of goes past. So I know this grid is just a little bit too big. Same way from left to right, north to south. It just kind of overextends. So I know it's got to be somewhere between 46 and 47, and I could put in, any number of jumps in there that will give us little incremental changes. I can see how it goes, but I'm just going to cut it right down the middle and see how that looks. So we'll put in 46.5, hit enter, and now when I look at this, I'm like, okay, from here to here, there's some shadowing here that just like image stuff, but it's pretty much close to on this line here, and it's pretty darn close to on that line there on the bottom side of this grid box. Same way with the left and right side. So right away I could see the 46.5 looks pretty clean to me. I don't even have to really do any more nudging. It's about where I wanted to. But if changing the grid size, bumps things a little bit, you could move it left and right and really try to get it to lay over top of it as closely as possible. And then, so then the next thing what I really want to do is come out here and see, well, how does that look like in the kind of a whole map view? Because as you move further away from the kind of the center point that you're positioning from, which is why I tend to use the middle of the map, it'll allow, if there's just fractional differences, where it's like hundredths of a pixel off. By the time you get way out to an edge of a map, and this one's a decent size one, I want to say I made this one when I converted it over here, like maybe 1,000 pixels wide. I wanted to make it decent enough that it maintained some of the nice graphic look to it. But when I come up here and I can even look and say, yep, it's slightly off here. I could probably toy around with this, but at this stage, a tenth is not going to make much of a difference. It's probably going to make it then, if I went a tenth bigger, it's probably going to then be a little bit slightly too large. If I make it a tenth smaller, it'll be slightly too small. And this is really, when I finish up the gridding, it's going to be certainly close enough to give you sort of exactly what you're looking for when you're playing around with putting creatures on here and seeing how they look on the grid itself. So what I want to do after that is saying, I think that's going to be close enough in the overall view to give us sort of what we want, but I probably don't want to see this double lining. I mean, a little stickler for detail, so maybe even seeing just the little bit of offsets that are some there, or maybe I decide, no, that's a little too much there. I'll nudge this down a little bit so it kind of lines up a little bit better. But in general, it's, as you zoom out to what would be normally a character view, that's pretty good. But there is this kind of combination of the graphic lines along with the Unity grid lines. And I don't really want to see that. It's a little too much. I could fade this down, the grid lines, by doing the grid pick color and coming down here to the bottom measurement, which is sort of oh boy, I'm not going to remember the actual name of the term, but it's kind of the transparency thing and um, how bold it stands out on there. And I could shift this up and down. You can see it kind of fades in and out. But since I already have a grid down there, then I got a pretty good approximation of what it looks like um, with the in-game grid. I could have that fade all the way down here, and now I'm just seeing the grid that came with the map itself. That would be really hard. I mean, there's some tools. I use Photoshop, and that allows me to do some spot healing, but it would be a pretty big effort. And in this case, what I really want to do is something simple I could throw in here and make use of right away. So fading that out, I could kind of see that, but because that grid is still there that we've created for this map, it's kind of hiding underneath, and it will still fit into what we see here. And I'll give a quick example of that by basically closing down the editor part of this and just showing the map that we have it. So now let's say I'm in game and I want to have a quick example of how creatures and how this grid might have fit in with the new gridding we had laid over top of this map that we had found. I threw out a couple creatures. An Orc Brute, which is a standard medium-sized creature. It'll take up kind of one square. Say throw him up here. He's kind of a little bit into the bushes here, waiting on the side of the caravan. If I had other characters out here, obviously I could do sort of a full scenario thing. But let's say down here, unbeknownst to the Brute as well, there's a rather large, and since it's a swarm, it's always going to take up a little more space. Spider swarm, it's saying there. Now I could see I had these the spider swarm already ready to target the Brute, that these snapped in very nicely into the grid that we had laid down there, and it looks like it's right into fits perfectly in with the grid that came with the map itself. Same way with the larger creature here with a greater kind of radius. That is the spider swarm, and what we're really looking for is are we getting accurate measurements of the distances? And I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is sort of a straight line in Pathfinder. That 35 feet we're looking for if we're trying to measure out distances between creatures. When we start throwing in angles where you get some differentiation because of Pathfinder using the second diagonal will be an additional 5 feet. We can see rather than being 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 to it, those extra diagonals add the extra feet that measures out the distance we need to know when it comes to how far we are for range attacks, spells, attacks, or just wanting to know what creatures are like. We can also do our quick little lines to say how far is it from here to there, and see quick measurements from square to square because our grid is lining up pretty well. That's really what we're looking for. We grabbed a map out here, threw it in there, rather long-windedly set up a grid for it that was pretty easy to do, and in short order. Once you get used to this, you could set these things up pretty fast using maps that already have grids established. You don't have to spend too much time cleaning it up. You just want to be able to pop it into your campaign, into your images folder, and pull it in as an asset, and be able to throw characters and creatures into it right away for use. So that's a simple way to just throw down a grid on top of this. There are, I certainly could go into things like line of sight, which I've had to obviously do with a lot of the mapping that I've done, and with the new kind of dynamic lighting, which is extremely cool out there. We could add all sorts of different things. I could see on this map there was a little bit of a fire pit that I could set this this map to being, let's say, at night, and put a light source in there, do some terrain line of sight features, and suddenly you would have all sorts of different ways to have this grid with line of sight features and stuff like that. But there's a lot of great videos like out there for Fantasy Grounds to detail that. But maybe at some point when I set up another one for one of the projects I work on, I'll do a video on how I work inside that just to add to the catalog of what's available out there. But hopefully, in the meantime, for people looking to just set up a grid over top of an image you found out there, obviously one of the keys is trying to find an image with a pretty clean looking map where the grids look well. Some of those, like, you can find there's definitely some distortion. One of the reasons why I was looking for one in this case was because uh, the scenario I was looking at had used tiles. The tiles didn't match up well, so the grids had some additional spacing between them. So that's when I was like, well, I need to just go out and find some sort of map that I want to be able to use that gives me some resemblance to the encounter that I want to set up. So at any rate, hopefully you guys find some use in this, and if it helps out even one person, it was worth the effort. So hope everybody has a great day and enjoy.